She was 19 years old. She was a virgin and had been sold to a 75-year-old billionaire sheik. On the wedding night he wanted only one thing, to legalize the marriage. But what happened in that bed shocked the whole world. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications and leave a like because this story is impossible to forget. Now take a deep breath because what comes next will break your heart. She was only 19. And that day she heard a phrase from her mother that changed everything. "This is the only way to save the winery." She thought it was a joke, but her father's eyes left no doubt. The proposal was real, official, and had a price no daughter should ever have to pay. A 75-year-old billionaire sheik was ready to pay off all the family's debts in exchange for a young wife. Not an actress, not a model, but a well-raised, modest woman from a traditional European family. "He wants someone like you," the lawyer said, pushing the contract across the table. On paper it all looked beautiful. Golden seals, official stamps, clauses in French and Arabic. But none of it felt right because she immediately understood what it truly meant even without reading the words. She was being exchanged for money, for the winery, for the family's survival, for their future. She resisted, screamed, cried, threatened to run away, but everything had already been decided. "It's a symbolic marriage," her father insisted. "He's an old man, he probably just wants company." She believed him, or wanted to believe. The agreement was signed by international lawyers. A representative of Morocco served as mediator. The family received financial protection immediately. The debts were frozen, the winery was removed from auction, and she lost her freedom. The flight to Marrakesh was scheduled for the following Saturday. She left alone on a quiet private plane, not knowing whether she was being led into a new life or to its end. The fear didn't come from sounds but from silence. The silence of the contract, the silence of her parents, and the silence she carried in her heart. The silence of someone who had already said yes, but had never wanted to. When she arrived in Morocco, she was greeted with great ceremony. A black armored car, a silent driver, a luxurious hotel reserved entirely for her. But none of it felt like a gift. It all looked like preparation. In the car she looked out the window and saw a city full of life. Children playing, bright market stalls, palm trees swaying in the warm wind, and she thought, "How can the world be so light while I'm marrying a 75-year-old man?" On the eve of the ceremony, already at the sheik's palace, she heard from the assistants. "He is very eager to meet you, madam." Her eyes widened. "Me? What does that mean? Isn't the marriage supposed to be formal?" She froze. She had believed the marriage would be just a formality, but no one had ever guaranteed that. Not her father, not the lawyers, not the contract. That night, alone in her room, she understood. Perhaps I will have to go to bed with him, and no one will come to save me. In the morning, on the wedding day, the palace was quiet, but it wasn't the quiet of peace, it was the quiet of control. She woke up early, having barely slept. The assistants entered the room with forced smiles, holding white dresses and speaking sweet words that only deepened her sense of captivity. "Today is your great day, Lady A. A great day." She wanted to laugh or scream. Dressing took nearly an hour. Pure silk, a pearl necklace, a light fragrance on her neck. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a bride but felt like merchandise in a package. In the main hall, everything was prepared for the ceremony. A few guests, all in impeccable suits, expressionless faces, diplomats, ambassadors, lawyers. There was not a single member of her family present. No one hugged her, no one looked at her as a daughter, as a human being. In the center of the hall stood the groom, Tariq ibn Rashid. He wore traditional clothing, a dark turban, and radiated confidence, vigor, and pride. His eyes lit up when he saw her. And it wasn't tenderness, it was possession. He was satisfied. Happy to know that in just a few hours he would receive what he had long desired, a young, untouched Western wife. The previous ones, all older than him, no longer interested him. Tariq wanted novelty, youth, obedience. She swallowed. The officiant made the formal introductions in Arabic and French. She answered only when necessary. She signed the papers she no longer bothered to read, accepted the ring, the blessing, and the title. She was officially a wife. After the ceremony, the sheik approached, leaned in and kissed her hand. She didn't move, didn't blink. "You are even more beautiful than they promised," he said with a smile. She felt sick. Later, toward evening, she was led down a narrow corridor. They passed heavy doors, thick curtains, a quiet inner garden. The maids left her in front of a golden door. "This is your wing, Lady A," they said. "And where is Master Tariq?" she asked. "He will come later, as tradition requires." The door closed and she, alone in that luxurious room, lay on a bed she had never chosen, her heart beating too fast to let her sleep, thinking only one thing: would this night truly happen? The room was quiet, too big, too cold. The decor was rich but soulless: gold furniture, heavy drapes, a huge mirror facing the bed. Everything seemed designed either to impress or to intimidate. She sat on the edge of the bed, her heart pounding, her legs cold, her hands trembling on her knees. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere left to run. Suddenly the door opened. Two maids entered, their heads lowered modestly. Without asking permission, they said, "You need to take a bath and put on the clothing prepared for tonight." She didn't answer or move, but the women already knew what to do. They prepared the bath and laid out a thin, almost transparent garment. It was not nightwear, it was a symbol of surrender. "Master Tariq will come soon," one of them said without emotion. "He likes everything done according to tradition." Tradition. That was what they called it. She stepped into the bath as if walking toward a sacrifice, washed in silence, and then put on the light, barely their garment that revealed much more than it covered. Returning to the room, she sat on the bed again. There was no sheet to hide under, no air left to breathe. A few minutes later he arrived. The sound of the turning doorknob echoed through the room like a muffled shot in the dark. She tensed instinctively, though she didn't move. Tariq entered slowly. He wore traditional clothing, his face freshly shaven. The scent of his perfume was overpowering. His eyes fixed on her with hungry intensity. He closed the door behind him and approached the bed as though approaching something he already owned. "You look beautiful," he said. She did not respond. His voice was low and commanding as he spoke to her, making clear what he expected and how the night was meant to follow their traditions. She felt herself growing colder inside with every word. Her hands trembled. Her mind drifted far away, even as she remained physically present. Tariq sat down beside her, his presence overwhelming, his breath heavy with anticipation. He leaned closer, his voice filled with desire and dominance, telling her what he wanted, what he believed was his right as her husband. She did not fight, she simply froze, her thoughts fleeing somewhere far beyond the room. And then, just as he was about to continue, he suddenly stopped. His breath faltered. His eyes widened, then rolled upward as if something inside him had gone dark. His body tensed for a split second, became rigid, and then collapsed, heavy, limp, lifeless. She lay still, stunned. She felt the weight of his body pressing on her shoulder, his hand fallen across her, the warmth of his breath that was fading by the second. "Tariq," she whispered weakly. There was no answer. She tried to push him away, but he was too heavy. She managed to shift him only a few centimeters. She was suffocating from the pressure, from the shock, from the terror. "Help!" she cried, using the last of her breath. The door burst open. Maids rushed in screaming. Two guards followed. One pulled the sheik's body sharply, the other covered him with a sheet. The room exploded into chaos. Doctors were summoned. The corridor filled with shouted orders in Arabic, hurried footsteps, and tense voices. She was taken to another room, still wrapped in a sheet, pale, in shock. She couldn't cry or speak. She felt an awful emptiness inside, as though the world had gone dark. Several hours later, she learned the truth. Tariq had suffered a severe, irreversible stroke. He fell into a coma, was placed on life support, did not respond, and would never return. During the next 3 months, AA lived in the palace without any right to leave or communicate with the outside world, as if she still belonged to him even while he lay unconscious. Until, one suffocating morning, a maid entered and said only, "Master Tariq passed away last night." There was an envelope on the table, a will, and the wife he never had the chance to be with was named a partial heir. No one ever mentioned that night, and she never spoke of it either because that night never truly happened. The funeral was modest. No cameras, no speeches. Just a brief ceremony surrounded by guards and silence. She was allowed to attend, despite being a widow and a lawful wife. The next day, the sheik's lawyer arrived at the palace in a dark suit, holding a folder and wearing an unreadable expression. "The will was opened this morning," he said plainly. "And you are included in it." A did not react. She could not tell whether this was a blessing or a curse. The marriage contract had a clear clause. For inheritance rights to take effect, the marriage had to be consummated. But no one knew what had truly happened that night, and Tariq had never spoken. He chose silence, a silence that could mean everything or nothing. But no one expected what came next. The sheik had left a private testament, guaranteeing her part of his fortune, property, investments, lifelong financial support, all within the framework of Moroccan inheritance law. It was a personal, carefully crafted, irrevocable decision. A gift, or a trap. Perhaps it was his way of saying, "You will carry my name with love or without it, willingly or not, and the world will know." But to the sheik's children, it was an insult. That very day attacks began. Press leaks, articles questioning her background, rumors about manipulation, seduction, and greed, accusing her of deceiving a powerful man to claim his fortune. A young Spanish woman becomes a millionaire widow in less than 3 months, the headlines said. A remained silent. No interviews, no public appearances. But silence did not protect her. The sheik's family hired lawyers and initiated legal proceedings to annul the will, claiming he had been sick, vulnerable, influenced, that she had taken advantage of an old and weakened man. And most importantly, that the clause about marital consummation had not been fulfilled. "It is a disgrace," one of the older daughters declared in an interview for a Dubai channel. "This woman stole what belonged to us." Yet nothing caused more tension than the news that arrived 2 weeks later. Zahir was returning. The youngest son, a graduate of international law from a London university, who had been absent for more than 5 years. Reserved, intelligent, dangerous. "He will not rest until he clears his father's name," people said. A heard it on television, sitting on the couch behind closed curtains while the world around her fell apart. She knew what was coming would not be just a legal battle, it would be personal. And she was the target. 7 years passed and A disappeared. Not from official documents, but from life itself. She now lived in southern Spain in an old house among the hills of Cadiz, with white walls, heavy curtains, a simple enclosed garden. Every morning she awoke at 6 a.m., drank tea, read, walked in silence. No parties, no public appearances, no interviews. The inheritance remained private. The court closed the case due to lack of evidence of manipulation, but her name was never cleared. Some called her a cold woman. Others, a clever victim. But no one truly knew what had happened that night. She never spoke of the marriage, the death, or the will. She hired a small group of guards, discreet, loyal men, to protect her from everything. The press, the curious, the story itself. She lived like someone carrying a ghost, with constantly alert eyes and a tired soul. Her days passed without words, tending the garden or sitting on the veranda, watching the wind rustle the olive trees. She tried to forget, but her body remembered, trembling sometimes in the dark. Even after all these years, peace would not come because A.A. knew, stories like hers do not end in silence. They simply pause for a while. And that pause was coming to an end. He arrived quietly. Zahir ibn Rashid, the legitimate son of Tariq. A man with a cold gaze, dark eyes and natural elegance. He was 35. Though desert blood ran in his veins, he was educated abroad, a graduate of international law in London. Reserved, sophisticated, fluent in 5 languages, he had watched from afar for 7 years. He had not appeared when his father collapsed, nor when he died, nor when the will was read. But now something troubled him. The absence of answers. A woman hiding deep in Spain, untouchable, unreachable, wealthy. Zahir had never accepted the story. An old man dying on the night of his wedding to a 19-year-old virgin. And she inheriting part of his fortune. It seemed unjust. It was a clear morning when he first entered Cadiz. He rented a black car and drove alone along the road that cut through the vineyards. The south of Spain looked calm on the outside, but inside him everything was tense and alert. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, dark suit trousers, and a simple yet expensive watch. There was no smile on his face, only focus. He parked the car in front of A's house. The gate was closed. Cameras stood on both sides. One guard was watching him from a distance. Zahir waited with the window down and his hand on the steering wheel. "Can I help you?" the guard asked dryly. "I'm here to speak with Mrs. A," Zahir replied with a clear accent and a firm tone. "She's not seeing visitors." "I am Zahir ibn Rashid." The guard swallowed, didn't answer right away, quickly made a phone call and returned. "She will not see you." Zahir simply nodded, didn't argue, and slowly shifted into reverse, as if it were part of the plan. And it was. He knew he wouldn't reach her through a straightforward visit. He knew she was protected. He knew that if he wanted answers, he'd have to approach differently. That night, Aila slept poorly. There was something strange in the air, something unusual, a vibration near the gate. She felt that someone was close, and it wasn't a journalist. The next day, Zahir checked into a hotel 3 kilometers away, using a fake name, and began observing. He learned where Aila bought bread, when the guard changed shifts, how many times a week she walked in the backyard. And most curiously, she lived alone, absolutely alone. In the hotel room, Zahir wrote everything down, photographs, times, details. Not out of obsession but strategy. He wanted to understand what was happening with this woman. She seemed unreachable, yet her eyes were empty. She seemed confident, yet never left the house. She seemed guilty. Or did he just want to believe that? For the first time, Zahir doubted her. Her face, the way she held cups with both hands, how she avoided looking men in the eyes, how she always kept her shoulders tense. There was something that didn't match the behavior of a calculating woman. On the 4th day he saw her in a store. She was distracted picking apples. He almost approached her but stopped. He sensed that she wasn't just a mystery, she was a minefield. One wrong step and everything would explode. But he didn't leave. After the first attempt to speak at the gate had been rejected, Zahir stayed nearby. Quietly, strategically, he started going to the same places. The same bakery, the same store, the same path she walked in the evenings. She noticed him, felt his gaze even when he pretended not to look, but said nothing. Not to the guards, not to the neighbor, not even to herself. She knew who he was and why he had come. In the 3rd week, Zahir knocked on her door. He was neat, freshly shaved, immaculate. A white shirt with rolled sleeves, a light gray jacket, polished shoes. "I didn't come for revenge," he said when the guard tried to stop him. "I heard it from upstairs, but she didn't come down. I just want to talk," he insisted. 10 minutes. No cameras, no accusations. Silence. "I just want the truth." Again silence. The guard slowly closed the gate. Zahir didn't argue, turned around and left, but he came back the next day. And the next. And the next. I began to wonder whether he truly wanted answers or if he was simply trying to destabilize her. That Saturday afternoon she was in the garden, watering her plants. Zahir appeared on the other side of the fence. "Beautiful flowers," he said, giving a small nod. She ignored him and continued watering the lavender roots. "I just want to understand," he said. "And you're the only one who can tell me." I turned off the hose, lifted her eyes and looked at him for a few seconds. "What exactly do you want to know?" It was the first time she spoke to him. Zahir slowly stepped closer to the fence. "Was there some kind of affair? You and my father?" I didn't answer. Her face didn't change, no surprise, no anger, only silence. "Did you touch him?" he continued. "Or did he touch you?" She turned away and began watering the plants again. Zahir stood still, taking a deep breath as if counting to 10 in his mind. "And the will? Was that your idea?" he finally asked. She let go of the hose. "Are you finished?" "For now," he replied. "But today, yes." He stepped back and walked away. The next week he returned. This time he didn't speak to her. He simply left a basket at her door, fruit, mint tea, and an envelope with a card. I don't want to intimidate you. I want to understand what my father saw in you, Zahir had written. She didn't respond and didn't return the basket. The following days passed in brief encounters. A nod from afar. A comment about the weather. A gaze held a little longer than necessary. And in every movement of Zahir saw something that unsettled him even more. She didn't seem cynical. She didn't seem cold. She seemed wounded. And that was harder to accept than any accusation. It happened accidentally. Zahir had spent the day dealing with legal matters in Seville, but his mind wasn't on paperwork. He returned to the hotel in the evening, tense and restless. He was tired of how he avoided everything, questions, looks, explanations. Always firm, always restrained, unreachable. In the hotel corridor he unintentionally overheard a conversation between the receptionist and a maid. She's strange, isn't she? I've never seen that woman laugh. And no wonder, considering what they say she went through. The only miracle is that nothing happened, that the old man died before. You know she was never touched. Zahir froze. The women noticed him. We're sorry, sir, we didn't know you were here. Who said that? He asked. The nurse who handled his body. She said he was clean, as if nothing had ever happened. Zahir said nothing, then simply walked away. The next day he arrived at A's gate earlier than usual. I need to talk to her, he told the guard. This time she allowed it. He waited for her in the garden. She was sitting with her legs covered by a white sheet, holding a cup of tea. Zahir approached confidently, but his gaze was different. No anger, something darker. The truth, he said directly. That you never had anything with my father? A lifted her cup without looking away. What difference does it make now? A big one. Then no. Zahir frowned. No, he touched you. You want to say the marriage was legitimate? Is that what you want me to hear? Yes. I want the truth. A stood up, calm and steady, walked closer and stopped a few steps away from him. Yes, the marriage was legitimate. Is that what you wanted to know? Yes. Zahir looked at her. Do you swear? I swear, A said, looking him in the eyes. She fell silent for a few seconds, then quietly, restrained yet defiant, added. Then prove it. A froze. Her gaze flickered for a moment. A single second, and he saw it. Zahir saw fear, doubt, the flush rising up her neck. She wasn't a master of lying, she was a master of silence. I don't have to prove anything, she said at last. But I just told you it happened. If it happened, it's in the past. Zahir took a step forward. She did not step back. Because if it didn't happen, he whispered, you would have had no right to the inheritance. Don't remind me. I know exactly what's at stake. Then why lie? She took a deep breath, looked up at the sky, and answered in a voice where pain and self-protection were hopelessly tangled. Because sometimes telling the truth means protecting no one. He fell silent. Her face was firm, but her eyes were shattered. And in that moment Zahir felt something he hadn't expected. It wasn't anger nor contempt. It was desire and guilt, because he was beginning to want to understand this woman, but he was also beginning to want to touch her. And it burned. In the days that followed, Aila tried to pretend nothing had changed. She watered her plants at the same hour, brewed tea at the same temperature, walked the stone path in the garden as if moving through air inside herself. But everything in her was more alert, more tense. Zahir didn't appear for 3 days. No gift baskets, no notes, no provocations. She should have felt relief. But she was uneasy. At noon on the 4th day he appeared without warning. He was dressed in black. The shirt fit tightly across his body, no jacket, no formality. His eyes looked darker, his face closed. She saw him from the terrace and slowly walked down. Here to demand more answers? She asked in the garden. No. Not to bring back doubts. She frowned. Zahir pulled a clipping from his pocket and showed her the headline. Spanish widow inherits fortune of Arab sheik after mysterious wedding night. Did you leak this? He asked. I stood still. She read the headline as if for the first time. But she already knew. She had read it, reread it, swallowed the taste of dry blood. Not me, she replied calmly. Because it benefited you, he insisted. The idea of a consummated night kept the will valid. "Not me," she repeated, her voice steady. "But you profited from it, didn't you?" Her silence hurt more than any scream. Zahir stepped forward. She didn't step back. "So that's it," he whispered. "You lied and you enjoyed it?" "I survived," she answered, looking straight into his eyes. "Enjoyed it?" He gave a bitter half-smile. It wasn't mockery, it was anger at himself. "You're good at this." "At what?" "At saying nothing while driving everyone insane." She took a deep breath, turned to go back into the house. But he followed. "Wait." She stopped without looking at him. "So that's your whole answer?" he asked. "You survived." She turned again and met his gaze. "And why are you here? For revenge, justice, or curiosity?" His eyes darkened, words vanished, and only the body remained. He came too close. His chest almost touched hers. The warmth of his breath hovered between them. I felt her heartbeat quicken. "Don't do this," she whispered. "Do what?" he asked. But he didn't move away. His hands almost touched hers. Almost, but didn't. She held her breath and stepped back. "You should leave." Zahir stood still, eyes fixed on her, pulse speeding up, desire hidden beneath the surface. "You don't hate me, Aila." "Maybe I should," she said, "but I don't hate you." She didn't wait for his answer and walked inside. Zahir remained alone in the garden. The sun began to set and his body burned from within. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he knew where to find it. His father's old study in the house in Tangier had been locked for years. No one went inside, not even the lawyers. But Zahir entered. The air smelled of old leather, waxed wood, and silence. Maps, books in Arabic, stacks of papers. Nothing was in its place, and that worried him. After hours of digging through folders, he found in the back of a drawer with a false bottom contracts for the purchase of A's family winery, signed by shell companies linked to Tariq. It felt like a blow to the stomach. Tariq had bought the winery long before its bankruptcy, had been a hidden partner, and had gradually sabotaged the family business, siphoning money, destabilizing exports, secretly pressuring creditors. It wasn't an accident. Not a bad investment. It was intentional. Zahir understood everything. His father destroyed what she had to make her rescue inevitable. Then turned her ruin into the perfect condition for marriage. Not out of love, but to possess her. Zahir sat in his father's chair, staring at the documents. Beside them lay a separate folder with photographs, copies of letters, and reports about A's life before the wedding. At 17, 18, village fairs, at home with family, at university, she had been watched. Long before she knew she would be sold, she had been marked. Zahir's blood froze. I wasn't greedy. She was a target, carefully chosen. And his father wasn't a sick man who died too early. He was a predator who knew exactly what he was doing. Returning to the hotel that night, Zahir didn't sleep. A's face flashed through his mind. The way she avoided eye contact, stayed silent, restrained herself, answered sharply. He realized. She had never lied, never tried to win sympathy. She stayed silent to survive, and paid for it every day. The next morning, Zahir asked one last question to one of his father's old lawyers. Why had no one questioned the consummation of the marriage? Why had no one dared to doubt it? Because to even suggest that the sheikh did not consummate the marriage would mean calling the deceased impotent, publicly disgracing his memory. None of the sons wanted to bear that shame. Not even you. Zahir said nothing. So that was the truth. I didn't inherit because she was acknowledged as a wife. She inherited because the world was too afraid to speak the truth. And in the end she did not inherit a fortune. She inherited the burden. Zahir closed his eyes and took a deep breath. A man who had sworn to protect his father's honor now had to decide whether to protect the memory, or free the woman he had helped destroy. With each passing day, it became harder to look at A without feeling that, in a way, she was everything his father had never dared to be. A free, silently unbreakable human being. In the evening, Zahir returned without warning, without guards, without a mask on his face. A was already waiting for him, as if she had sensed his footsteps in the garden even before hearing the gate. She said nothing, just opened the door and let him in. Silence stretched for more than a minute, but inside everything was screaming. Zahir stepped toward her slowly, without pushing, without rushing. "Forgive me, Aila," he finally said. "For everything." She simply felt it. He took a deep breath. "I didn't come to take anything from you." "I know," Aila answered quietly. Zahir stepped forward, slowly raised his hand, and touched her face with the tips of his fingers. Her skin was warm, her cheeks faintly flushed. He traced the line of her jaw, the curve of her chin. Aila didn't pull away. Her eyes were locked on his. There was fear in her gaze, but also desire, tension, and expectation. Then he gently took her by the nape and his lips met hers. It was a firm, warm, wet kiss. His tongue entered without asking, as if it knew exactly where to go. He explored with precision, claiming space. She moaned against his mouth. The sound was hoarse, caught somewhere between pain and pleasure. Zahir bit her lower lip hard, then licked it, then did it again. His hands tightened around her waist. Hers gripped his neck, his shoulders. Her body bent toward his, as if wanting to dissolve into the touch. It was a kiss of urgency, anger, desire, fear, and hunger. When he pulled back by barely a few millimeters, still pressing his forehead to hers, their breathing was unsteady. "Aila," he whispered roughly. She only said, "Stay." In that stifling room lit by the fading sun slipping through the cracks of the window, Aila slowly took off her blouse. Her hands were trembling, without romance. There was no music, only breath. Zahir watched her as if asking for permission with his eyes, though he hadn't touched her again yet. She removed her trousers, remained in her underwear, then took that off too. There was no shame, only surrender. He came closer, running his fingers along her collarbones, down the curve of her neck, the center of her chest. He lowered himself calmly, confidently. His touch was the touch of someone who knows, who leads but also waits. When she stepped back a little, he stopped. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded, though her eyes glistened. It wasn't pleasure yet. It was fear. Zahir gently laid her down and moved between her legs. His body was warm, firm. The pressure of his hips was controlled. His breathing grew heavier. Aila held her breath. He looked into her eyes and waited. "I've never," she began, but her voice trembled. Zahir only whispered, "I know." Then he entered her slowly, deeply, and carefully. Aila moaned from the pain, closed her eyes, clutched the sheets, but she didn't say no and didn't withdraw. Her body opened for the first time, not only physically. He stopped, remaining inside her without rushing. She felt everything. He felt everything. He kissed her neck, her chin, her lips, bit lightly, then licked, then moaned. His movements began slow, then steadier, then stronger. It hurt her, but the pain was hers. And for the first time it was chosen. His hand ran along her waist, slid up her back, gripped her hair with strength, with desire, with hunger. Aila breathed heavily, but not from fear. It was something else. She opened her eyes. Zahir looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "I'm yours," she said. He answered, his voice ragged, "No. You are my choice." He kept moving until her whole body trembled, until she began to cry without understanding why, until everything inside her screamed, "I am alive." Silence. The room was still warm, their bodies intertwined, their breaths slowly calming. She lay on his chest with her eyes closed, and for the first time without heaviness. But the world outside the window did not sleep. And the next day came the news that changed everything. Days passed as if nothing outside the walls existed. The house breathed with them. The room. The garden, the quiet veranda. Aila and Zahir loved each other with a restrained, almost daily insistence. It wasn't just desire, it was necessity. He woke earlier than she did, watching her sleeping face. She waited for him in the evenings with a warm body and calmer eyes. They spoke little and touched often, as if speaking their own language. But outside that world, everything was observed. The maids whispered when she walked past. Zahir's two brothers began appearing again in the old Andalusian palace, their eyes following every step. "They're together," someone whispered. "This is temporary," another replied. "She's trying to hold on to what she inherited." They talked behind doors. Zahir pretended not to hear, but Aila heard everything. Days passed, then weeks. Her body began changing slowly. First came the morning nausea, then the fatigue, and finally the delay. She counted days, then counted them again. Sitting on the bed with her hands on her stomach, she tried to accept what she already knew but couldn't yet say aloud. She didn't tell him. She couldn't. Memories of that cursed clause in the contract, the one no one spoke of anymore but which she never forgot, echoed in her mind like a quiet sentence. If she became pregnant before a year had passed since her husband's death, the heiress would lose her right to the inheritance, except in cases where the children were officially recognized as the deceased's. But Tariq was dead and Aila had never been touched by him. If anyone found out, if anyone suspected, if anyone checked, she would lose everything. Not just money but safety, the right to stay there, her story, and possibly even Zahir. One hot day she had a small bleeding. Nothing serious but enough to make her go pale. She locked herself in the bathroom, washed her face 3 times, then looked in the mirror. She was pregnant, she knew it. And it wasn't a joyful revelation but a sentence with a set date. That night, Zahir embraced her from behind on the veranda. "You're distant," he said quietly. "Just tired," she answered. "Of you, of everything." He didn't insist, only held her tighter. But Aila carried another secret inside her. A secret that moved, grew, and once revealed could destroy everything. The next day one of the oldest servants, a Moroccan woman who had served Tariq for decades, approached her with a cup of tea and whispered, "If it's a boy, they will never let him inherit peacefully." Aila froze and in that moment understood she was utterly alone. She tried to maintain everything as before, the routine, the calm, the silence. But Zahir watched. She no longer ate in the mornings, and when she did, she swallowed slowly without taste. She went to bed earlier and woke with deeper eyes. The third time she ran from the garden to the bathroom with her hand over her mouth. He said nothing. But he noticed. That evening when he embraced her from behind, something had changed. Her stomach was no longer the same, almost unnoticeably, but he knew every curve of her body like a prayer, and there was something new there, something growing. Aila began avoiding mirrors and he stopped asking questions, until one humid morning she stood by the window in a thin nightgown. Zahir saw her from afar and no longer doubted. The fabric clung to her slender body, but in the center was a slight swelling, small but unmistakable. Zahir entered the room quietly, his eyes burning. He didn't look around, he walked straight to her. Aila stood by the window with a blanket over her shoulders. She hadn't noticed him or pretended not to. His voice cut through the air. "How long were you planning to keep this from me?" She froze. "When were you going to tell me, Aila?" She turned slowly. A pale face, eyes full of tears. "When? After it grew? After it was too late? I was afraid." "Afraid of me?" He stepped forward. His voice was quiet but firm. "Or afraid of losing the inheritance?" She drew a deep breath, met his gaze, and didn't answer at once. "Both." Zahir closed his eyes, ran a hand through his hair, turned his back on her. He almost walked away but stopped, slowly faced her again. His gaze carried not only anger now but hurt. "You hid it from me. You didn't lie but you stayed silent. And that hurts too." Aila took a deep breath. Her eyes were wet but steady. "I didn't know how to tell you. When I realized it, it was already too late. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of losing everything. Of losing you. Of losing this place. This small piece of peace." Zahir looked at her silently. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, restrained. "I have no doubt this child is mine. What hurts is knowing you went through this alone." She walked toward him slowly and rested her forehead against his chest. "But I'm not alone anymore." He wrapped his arms around her, and in that moment, even with a war raging outside, the silence between them felt like refuge. Zahir looked down at her stomach. The curve was barely noticeable, but it was there. He touched it gently as if it were something sacred. "They will try to take this from you, from the child. But they won't succeed." Aila closed her eyes, breathing in rhythm with him, and he was already beside her. Not as a son, not as an heir, but as a man. From that day everything accelerated. The stairs multiplied. Hidden questions turned into open accusations. Stepsisters began appearing without warning. Aunts spoke loudly as if she were deaf. She grew paler, rounder. "She's hiding something." One of the old lawyers approached Zahir. "If this is confirmed, you understand the political weight, yes?" Zahir replied only with a look that required no explanation. That same day he called a meeting. The marble hall was cold, echoing. Uncles, cousins, brothers, lawyers, everyone stood in silence. Zahir entered alone, dressed in black, gaze unwavering. "Aila is pregnant. The child is mine. And whoever dares to harm her or this child will have to go through me." Silence. "You never accepted her existence. Now you'll have to accept that she is staying." He took a deep breath. The weight on his chest turned into a decision. "I inherited my father's name. But I did not inherit his mistakes." He turned and walked away. He knew the war had only begun. The house felt quieter than ever. Zahir returned from the meeting with a firm gaze but a tired body. There was nothing left to say to the family. He had said everything that mattered. Now he needed to say what hadn't yet been said to her. He found Aila sitting barefoot on the terrace, her eyes fixed on the gray sky. He approached slowly, sat beside her without touching her. She was the one who broke the silence first. "You should hate me." "Why?" "For everything. For how it all began. For how long I stayed silent." Zahir took a deep breath. "I hated the world for giving you so little, and I hated my father for thinking he could buy you." She turned her face in surprise, but he wasn't there to hurt her. "I don't want you out of pity, not for the child, not for honor." She looked into his eyes. "Then why?" Zahir smiled slightly, that rare smile only he had. "Because now I want to choose you. With wealth or without. With a name or without." A lump rose in her throat, but she didn't cry. "I'm no longer the girl who came here out of fear," she said. "Not the widow the world wanted to bury with his name. Not property, not a scandal. I belong to myself." Zahir watched her silently as if waiting for what would come next. Aila touched her belly, then his hand, and finally said, "I want to be yours." Zahir leaned in, pressed his forehead to hers and whispered, "Then stay, but only if it's your choice, not mine. Not out of fear." She felt it. Her eyes closed. Her heart finally found peace. That night there were no promises, no rings, no solemn words. Only the two of them lying together, holding hands, while the whole world remained behind the walls. And for the first time Aila didn't feel she had to resist, because now she was exactly where she chose to be. At sunrise they arrived at a small village on the southern coast of Spain. No bodyguards, no witnesses, no family. The house was white on the outside, with blue windows and a veranda overlooking the sea. Inside it had 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, and a courtyard with lavender. Nothing more. But for Aila it was enough. For the first time it was enough. The wedding took place right in the courtyard. A local judge, invited by Zahir's friend, conducted the ceremony. There was no wedding dress. She wore a light tunic. He wore a white shirt and linen pants. It was the simplest wedding they had ever seen. But for Aila, it was the truest wedding she could dream of. When the judge finished, Zahir stepped closer. First he kissed her forehead with reverence, then her lips with tenderness and firmness. Their hands met calmly. Yes sounded unhurried, and their eyes said everything that didn't need words. The legal process moved quietly and slowly. Zahir's family filed a lawsuit to challenge the will, trying to annul part of the inheritance left to Aila. They used her pregnancy as an argument to overturn the clause that stated she would lose her rights if she became pregnant within a year of Tariq's death. But Aila didn't fight. She chose to give it up. She signed a voluntary document, refusing most of the assets tied to Tariq's name. She kept only a small property in the south of France, an old family vineyard. The one piece of history she insisted on keeping. And enough to live far away simply and freely. Zahir took only what was his and refused to touch what was hers. "We're not here to repeat the past," he said. "We're here to do it differently." And they did exactly that. In their new home, Aila woke early, drank tea on the veranda, felt the cool ceramic beneath her feet, listened to the sea and remembered who she had been, so she would never return to that again. Zahir made coffee, stroked her belly before saying a word, and then kissed her, calmly and sincerely. The child grew in silence, without noise, without pressure, without fear. One night, unhurried, he entered the room and found her sitting on the bed. Her hair was loose, her gaze calm, a quiet smile on her lips. She waited silently, and when he approached, she said, "The night that was supposed to be my first was a nightmare. Fear, silence, pain. It wasn't love. It wasn't giving. It wasn't me." Zahir sat beside her, took her hands and answered, "Then let this be your first, the only one that matters to us." She nodded, and the kiss came before the words, hot, wet, real. His lips found hers as if returning home, with tongue, with desire, with reverence. They lay together easily, without rituals, without fear. They made real love, without the past, without debts, without shame. When Aila, breathless, rested on his chest, he ran his hand over her belly and whispered, "Now you're my wife, the mother of my child, and the love of my life." She smiled, a full, free smile, and replied, "Now I'm your first by choice." Their story did not begin like a fairy tale, but was woven from new beginnings, from scars turned into strength, from silence turned into refuge, from everything that only love can heal. If this story touched you, like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here in Stories of Love and Romance, we believe that every pain deserves a new beginning, and every new beginning deserves to be told. Now tell us in the comments where you're watching from. See you in the next video. Remember, some stories begin with pain but end up saving our lives.